Well, it is 10:30, ladies and gentlemen. I'm just pausing for the... Yes, it started. So our vast audience, again, is waiting on every word that you've got to say. So do be careful. So, formally, I'm Councillor Philip Owen, the Chairman of the Committee, and I would like to welcome all of you to the meeting of the Governance and Ethics Committee. And as I've already indicated, is being broadcast live and recorded for posterity. The first item on the agenda are the minutes of the last meeting. Do I have your approval to sign them as a true record, those that were here? Thank you very much. I'll do that at the conclusion of the meeting. Item number 2, apologies for absence. I'm going to hand over to Noel because we've got that many and substitutions. He's going to read them all out for us.
Thank you, Chair. The apologies we have are for Councillor Henry for other reasons, and the substitute is Pauline Allen. Councillor Michael Payne for other reasons, and the substitute is Jim Creamer. Apologies from Councillor Sue Saddington for medical illness reasons. The substitute is Councillor John O'Lee. Substitute also for Nigel Turner for medical illness, and the substitute is Councillor Eric Kerry. We have apologies from Councillor Helen Ann Smith for other reasons. The substitute is Councillor John Wilmot, and we have apologies for other reasons for both Councillor Sam Deacon and Andy Meakin. We have no substitute for that, and they just asked to point out that this is a rescheduled meeting from the 15th of January, and unfortunately it clashes with a planning committee meeting for whom the Ashfield Independent members are also members of that planning committee. So that is offered as an explanation for the other reasons for non-attendance today.
Thank you. That'll be the longest item on the agenda, I suspect. Are you happy to accept those? Yeah, thank you. Right. Item number 3, declarations of interest by members and officers. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Lee.
Last item, Sherwood communicate review on the matter.
Okay, and so having declared an interest, you will leave during the detailed discussion of that item. Okay, thank you. Right, if we can therefore move next to the substantive item on the update on local government and social care ombudsman's decision October-November 2024, and you can see set out in front of you that there is one item, one complaint where the ombudsman has found against the authority, and I will move the recommendation at the bottom of page 12.
Second it.
Thank you. And so, are there any additional points that need to be made on this, or are you quite happy that the report is self-explanatory before I hand over to members? Quite happy on? Yep. Okay. Well, I would just point out one or two things. This is a Children's Services Department complaint, and it centres around the fact that the school concerned didn't notify us as promptly as they should have done that this child was not attending school. And I know that's been the subject of a lot of, that whole issue has been the subject of a lot of comment in the press, but I'm not going to go there. We've got to focus on this particular case. We've asked officers if they will try and undertake some training or reminders to schools as to their duty, and it is their duty to notify us as soon as the appropriate period of absence has elapsed, and we need them to be reminded of that. And if we need to do any further training on that, then the department are going to do that. So that's the first point I would make to you. The second point is at paragraph 8, those that are regular members or regular substitutes will know that we've had complaints upheld by the local government ombudsman concerning care homes. Of course, we've have huge involvement with care homes across Nottinghamshire, and where there has been a complaint made to a care home, if that's not been satisfactorily resolved and the complainant has gone to the Ombudsman, any finding of fault is a finding of fault against this local authority, even though we've not really been involved in that complaint. And so officers have undertaken training with those care homes. I don't know how many have been involved, you might like to tell us shortly. Undertaken training with those care homes to try and help them manage complaints to avoid the complainants finding it necessary or feeling it necessary to go to the local government ombudsman. And I think that's very important and welcome proactive work in the complaints field. And I would just also point out on page 10, the paragraph that starts additional funding. You can see there the amount of additional funding of £24,000. Now, when residents say, "Where's my money going? Where's my council tax going?" Well, there is a classic example, and that is just one case. One case, additional funding of £24,000. Any further comments or any comments from members? Councillor Wilmot.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. I'm very pleased that this council has recognised their shortcomings in this case. I mean, we all hope that every child would get an education and, in fact, deserves an education. And Nottinghamshire County Council has clear responsibility to ensure this happens. There does still remain clear issues on pages 10 and 11. I've marked them up. There's quite a lot of red pages that I've made out, and particularly around the send provision. But I'm pleased to see that this council is taking clear steps to ensure it doesn't happen again. I notice it cost the council in the Children's and Families Department a total of £1,789. And is just the latest in payments made to compensate families impacted by this council. Well, the question is, I don't know whether any of you could answer it. What is the total paid out in the last financial year from the Children's and Families budget for this financial year? And how does this compare to previous years? Has anybody got that information?
Well, it's certainly not the information I carry around in my head. And from what officers are saying, it's not the information they carry around in there. Has got other things. So I'm sure we can let you have a written answer on that. Just to remind members, for those that may have forgotten, the issue of SEND was one of great difficulty in recruiting educational psychologists. Now, Councillor Wilmot, if you had recognised that this was a problem or realised, you could have come forward with your suggestions on how we could have got more educational psychologists on board. We're working towards that, and it's not easy. It is a national problem, and I think virtually every other authority, I stand corrected if I'm wrong, every other authority has experienced that same difficulty. It's all right to criticise, and quite happy for you to do so, but it needs to be criticism with some solutions, and I hear no solutions. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chairman. Me and my wife have been through the process at this council of getting our child an EHCP. It was actually, and I'm not just saying because I've spoken to another committee about the same thing, it was a flawless process. I expected it to be quite difficult with what I've seen here, but actually it was a flawless process. Yes, we had to speak to somebody from Newcastle on Teams, we couldn't meet somebody face to face. However, the process was absolutely flawless. While I was the vice chairman here, some of the cases that were fingered against this council were not our fault. One that comes to mind in particular was during COVID, when we were found because we couldn't supply water therapy for a child. Well, there wasn't water therapy available at that time. So I know what Councillor Wilmot wants to do. He wants to find some information for his leaflets. That's exactly what he wants to do because we're getting into that process. What Councillor Wilmot should be asking is, which cases have the council been found against that weren't actually council's fault? So the care homes, that was a great thingy by the chairman. But like the one I've just mentioned, lots of the cases that I dealt with when I was vice chairman here, and that I've seen from reading the other reports, are not actually the council's faults. And that's what I think Councillor Wilmot needs to take in consideration when he's asking for these data. Is he's asking the wrong questions. And the one thing that I don't think anybody will ever say about the chairman is, if something goes wrong at this council, he will hold the council to account. And that's great credit to the chairman on that.
Thank you. Any other comments from members before I bring in officers? Any comments from officers that you... Sorry, Councillor Kerry, I missed you. Thank you.
Yeah, and following on from that, I think it's clear that there's been organisational learning, and that's a very, very important part of improving and enhancing services. So I'd like to thank officers for work done and the training, etc., that's been carried out. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. Yes, there's always learning and improvement, and I've outlined one or two of those ways in which we've tried to deal with that. Any further comment from officers, or are you content with that?
And Councillor Owen, just to confirm that all these recommendations have been carried out and seen through, and that the learning will be put into practice.
Thank you very much. The report has been moved and seconded. It is actually a noting report, so there was no need to move and second it. It is a noting report, so you're happy to note. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is item number 5, is the counter fraud progress report. Thank you for your time. The counter fraud progress report, we are familiar with this type of report. Is there anything you wish to add to that? I think it's fairly self-explanatory. I don't see there's any particular issues with it. It's the usual. And again, it is a noting report. Are there any comments from members? Sorry, Councillor Wilmot, what you got written down this time?
Thank you, Chair. My question is regarding the blue badge fraud,
Yes.
if you don't mind.
No, of course not.
Which impacts on most vulnerable members of the public with disabilities or mobility issues. When a badge is misused, this can result in disabled people being unable to find suitable parking or unwillingness to go out, and ultimately isolation from the community. The report states 663 errors, according to the report, were noted between 2022 and 2024, with estimated savings of £430,950. Is this the tip of the iceberg, though? I don't know. Perhaps someone would like to tell me if it is. In 2023-24, Nottinghamshire County Council organised a Blue Badge Day of Action, where 2 instances of misuse were picked up within the 171 Blue Badge checks undertaken. There were 4 other days identified, but there was no information about activity undertaken in this report to proactively identify blue badge fraud in the last financial year. Does that mean that it didn't happen? We were all right? And if it did, how many days of action were actually organised, and what was the outcome? As I say, a simple look at what other councils like Buckinghamshire, Enfield, Greenwich, Haringey are doing shows we do very little in comparison. Now, last year, you agreed to look at other councils' proactive approach to blue badge fraud and act accordingly. Did this happen? I'd love to know the answers to those 2 questions.
Right. Before I bring in Councillor Creamer, does anybody want to comment on those? Any officer?
I'll pick that up. It's a very similar line of inquiry that we had last year.
Yeah.
And you quote the same councils. The explanation last year was that they're London Borough councils with high return. We explained that to the councillor who raised the question before. The Day of Action is organised by the district councils in connection with the council, and the officer revolved around from the county council, I think, actually presented back to committee previously on the work that they do. I don't organise hit events. They're organised by the district councils, because they have to be done in collaboration with the district, county and the police authority.
Thank you. So you need to take your questions back to Ashfield District Council, of which I believe you are a member.
Yeah.
So we're obviously into recycling, and we've recycled questions.
Yeah.
So we'll recycle the answers because they're equally valid. Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, before I get to my question, just going back to the previous one, some of the answers we're actually reviewing research, so that is what a few of the answers as well. Item 6 on this about learning, cancer, or e-learning. Just a general question: does that include the AI that's coming in? As AI is coming in positively, it's also going to come in negatively as well. So e-learning does actually include AI as well.
Very astute question. In terms of the learning we're developing, we're not using AI to develop that learning. And we are, though, putting learning in place to how you can be avoided being scammed from the use of AI and how to avoid that and give people awareness on how that limits what their expectations of it should be. So really things to watch out for from AI. We haven't used it to develop that training deliberately because we wanted to source that from more recognised sources than the sources with the AI background.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions from members? No? Happy to note the report. Yeah. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the independent remuneration panel members. This is in preparation for the new council taking office after May the 1st, and almost certainly there will be some changes involved, and the new administration will want the independent remuneration panel to have a look at that, and so you're asked to put that in place in preparation for May the 1st. This panel is one that we've had before, but I understand that there will be changes going forward to the panel, which I think is probably a good idea. But at the moment, you're asked to approve these members of the independent remuneration panel. So we've got a recommendation at the bottom of page 32, which I move. A second. Any comments or questions on this? Councillor Wilmot.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I realise that it is a legal requirement that we have, and I have no problem with the reappointment of the selected panel members. But bearing in mind, under local government organisation, Nottinghamshire Council may not exist in a few months' time. I just wondered if it was worth applying to the government to delay the appointment of a panel until we're clear about the future and how our county will be governed. You know, I wonder if that's at all possible.
Well, anything's possible, but of course we're having elections on May the 1st. The new county council will be in place on May the 2nd, and the annual council meeting will take place. The council will run for at least a couple of years, if not longer. There's no definitive date given for the completion of local government reorganisation. So we've got to operate the council going forward for at least 2 years minimum. So I can see little point in delaying the appointment of the independent remuneration panel. Little point whatsoever. Any other comment from members? Councillor Barnford and then Councillor Carey.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I always, of course, welcome Councillor Wilmot's comments. He takes the role of opposition to its ultimate limits in that he opposes everything that this authority does in some way or another. I'm waiting with bated breath for his comments on the following items in the agenda. The appointment of the remuneration panel is a statutory requirement. And at the start of the commencement of any new administration, whether that is a continuing administration, as of course will be the case here with the Conservative administration, or whether it's the dream wish administration of Councillor Wilmot, and it may involve the diminished Ashfield Independent Group, there is still a statutory requirement for the Independent Remuneration Panel to meet to agree to the funding package effectively for members' allowances, for cabinet positions, for committee chairs, vice chairs, etc. I, as the business manager, have had the dubious pleasure of appearing before the Independent Remuneration Panel on many occasions and presenting the administration's recommendations and structure of its cabinet or committee appointments. They obviously scrutinise what we do. They scrutinise the cost to the taxpayer and look at whether or not it is value for money. And of course, this administration has been tremendous value for money, as we will see when we present the budget to Cabinet tomorrow. So I'm sure Councillor Wilmot is well aware that it's a statutory undertaking, but of course there was a need to say something on his part. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barnford. Councillor Carey.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with Councillor Barnford. I'd just like to use a different word. In paragraph 2, it states that he uses the word statutory, which is a very good word, but it actually says this is a legal requirement. So by not having it, it would be an illegal county council. So I think we should get on with it.
Thank you. I don't think there's anything further to be said on this. Our recommendation has been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Right, if we can move on to item number 7, the English Devolution White Paper, proposed changes to standards and audit regime. I've had this report produced as an opportunity for an early discussion. I don't want to discuss the merits or otherwise of the government's proposals. But what I did think it would be useful for you to look at is what is included as far as member standards and local government audit are concerned. And so it's been set out in a very brief report, and it's a noting report, so we don't need to move and second it. But are there any comments or observations on this report? Councillor Lee.
Chairman, thank you. At another place, we had a brief from Chief Executive at Newark District Council that stated lots of the information is now being requested by county colleagues to trying to work out strategies and structures and then trying to bring it all together. If that is the case, are the county council getting any extra funding or staffing to be able to supply with this extra workload, or was that just what he thinks will happen and it hasn't started yet?
Sorry.
So I think what you're referring to there, Councillor Lee, is work on local government reorganisation. So all the councils in Nottinghamshire are working together, and obviously we'll want to look at data, look at options, etc., etc. So we're working together on that. I don't think at the moment the government has given us any extra money, but we're looking to try and fund that and resource that between us.
That is being funded amongst the district and county councils because at Broxtow's cabinet meeting last night, they approved a 6,000 contribution from Broxtow. I assume all the other districts are having a similar contribution. I don't know what the county council's contribution is. Councillor Creamer, you wanted to comment.
Just a comment more than anything else. Remember this standards, no problem, it says all the right things, but it just seems a little weak again on the actual sanctions. So that's where I just find it a little bit weak on the sanctions in the process itself. But on what it's actually saying, raising standards, no problem whatsoever.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Bonfowler.
Thank you, Chairman. I appreciate that you and I, as we have had this discussion outside of the chamber, may have somewhat different views. I welcome the review of the standards regime. The standards regime at the moment, it's not worth the title standards regime because it has no processes and it has no teeth. And we used to have a standards committee at this authority when I was first elected, which I sat on and took part in various investigations into allegations against members, some of which, of course, were found to be disproved and some which were found to be proven. and there was indeed a robust process in place. Picking up on Councillor Creamer's point, of course, the sad thing was that having gone through a robust process, there were very few penalties that could be imposed against errant members. And I think if the government are minded to bring in not only a robust process, but a means by which members who abuse their position should be and can be punished, that is more in accordance with the rules that apply to members of Parliament, for instance. It seems a bit of a nonsense here that members, council members of any authority, cannot effectively be suspended because they are elected by the public. It's very difficult to ban them from council offices if their presence in council offices or interaction with officers themselves would be detrimental. We can't do that. We can't stop their allowances, even though there may be allegations against them of a significant nature. They continue to effectively receive payment from the public purse to carry out their role. There is considerable reputational damage on occasions to authorities across the country where councillors have committed or been accused of committing various misdemeanours, and there at the moment there is no way of indeed punishing councillors. And I suppose as a former policeman, I would say if there is no fear of sanction or punishment, there is no fear of committing the crime in the first place. So you have to have effective sanctions in place as well as an effective method of investigating those complaints to either find the individual totally blameless or indeed blameworthy. So I welcome what the government is doing here, and I, like Councillor Creamer, hope that they make sure that sanctions that can be applied where members have absolutely breached the trust that members of the public put in them by electing them in the first place can be properly punished. Thank you, Chairman.
As Councillor Bonfather intimated, we did have a discussion about this prior to this meeting, and my views, I won't say are diametrically opposed, but more or less diametrically opposed to what he's saying, because like a number of you, I had to live through the old Standards Board regime, and I think that was one of the best things, some might say one of the only things that the previous Conservative governments did that was good. They got rid of that wretched organisation known as the Standards Board, which was a huge bureaucratic nonsense. It encouraged all and sundry to make spurious complaints about members of council occupying an inordinate amount of time. And you'll not be surprised to know that I had one or two complaints against me, all of which were dismissed out of hand. They were dismissed, but not before I'd had to be interviewed by a representative of the Standards Board. We have laws in place for people who commit fraud, who are bullies, who are objectionable in any way, that they can be hauled before the courts, and that to me is sanction enough. But what this will do is to open a can of worms. We shall have complaints flying around right, left and centre. And at the end of the day, my view is that it's a further attempt on free speech, an attempt to gag us so that we don't say things that some people may not like. So we are, I think, diametrically opposed, but there we are. That's the nature of the debate, isn't it? We'll see what happens. Are there any other comments that members wish to make, or are you happy to note the report? Thank you, it's noted. And if we can therefore move to the next item, Councillor Lee's departing. It's Newark and Sherwood Community Governance Review. Quite simply, it's Newark and Sherwood wanting to reorganise some of the boundaries of their parish councils. We have, at this stage, a standard letter that we issue. Our basic position is that as a council, we don't interfere at this stage, but when the more substantive proposals come forward, we do then, as a council, look at them really with an eye to ensure that there's as much coterminosity between parish boundaries and county divisions as there possibly can be. And if we have concerns at that point, we normally make our observations known. There is two recommendations on page 44, which I move.
I second.
Are there any comments or questions from members? No, in that case, all those in favour? Anyway, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And the last item is the work programme. We have one more meeting scheduled on the 5th of March of this council before the county council elections. Are you happy to accept the work programme? Yep. Thank you very much. So thank you for your attendance, and I declare the meeting closed.